Alan Silva here, broadcasting from our studios here in Lamont. Hello, this is Alan Silva, broadcasting from our studios here in Lamont. And today's on I Have Celestial Web TV is a discussion about UFOs and the idea that Buddhist doctrines, a text called the Lotus Sutra of the True Law, indicates some kind of phenomena, that most researchers on this field haven't really looked at this document, which is called the Lotus of the True Law. Inside of this milieu of UFOs. So I choose to there's a discussion at a Harvard thing called UFOs, Alien Productions, and a very famous man. We're going to call him out here in a second.
UFOs and Alien Abductions. Jacques Valley, Ph.D., Terence McKenna, John Mack, Harvard Psychology.
That is a UFO little document I found because I thought it was the famous guys that I really support in terms of my generation. My generation, which was the generation of 1939 generation, and that's a lot of people born before the war, 39, many 38, 40, 30, 39, in the area of art, musicians, composers in the United States, at that time. This generation of artists, visionaries, Sun Ra, and people, musicians in the area of jazz and improvisation, in the area of visual arts, science fiction, and so forth. So we were like, by the time the 50s appeared, we were already into my generation, in a sense, into science fiction. So I'm not talking about in terms of the 50s. Already there is, in my sense, in the religious sense or something like that, in the scientific sense, the idea that there are other people out there in the world. Now that is the major issue behind all these UFO sightings, is to try to accept the fact that we are part of as we know in scientific, we're part of a star system, you understand? And then there's hundreds of star systems. You learn that in high school, when you study astronomy a little bit. So you can't assume as a person in high school in 1960s, say 1950s, to think that you're the only one on the planet. Now, who came up with that idea to drill the American population scientifically that they're the only ones? I hear this a lot among these researchers and so forth, among the people that I assume that went to the same education I did in the 50s and 60s. If you took a high school education as the basis of my education during the 50s, science, biology, physics, all these courses were in my course, and these are not mathematical courses. I'm talking about science from the point of view of biology, science in terms of physics, what's behind that. So by the time you finish this, you have a general knowledge, you know, of these fields. Nobody can expect to be no one in high school, the high school teacher is not giving you this course for you to become a scientist. In fact, it is just giving you a basic science concepts, you know, if you're in school. No one. So for us to believe in spacecrafts, which were at that time a science fiction, but in artistic sense, artists created images. So take that up. That holds a whole generation, you know. So for us, anything outside of our planet is possible. Einstein even said that. So 18, 17, 8-year-old come out of, like myself, came out of high school with a high school education. That was possible. You understand? You know. But in the music field that I joined, improvising, there was many people talking about spacecrafts, so forth. I'm gonna give you a couple of rundowns on that in the future because this thread, you know, that I see on YouTube, basically based on 2 or 3 factors, you know. In this interview that you're gonna see, and then we'll discuss this interview from the point of view of my point of view of the interview. And then let's look at this interview.
I think one of the interesting things to mention about you is the fact that you were the person that Steven Spielberg modeled a character of a UFO researcher on in his classic movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I think he was intrigued with the idea of a French scientist running around the United States investigating the UFO phenomenon.
You've been looking at this phenomenon for a long time. You've worked closely with Dr. Alan Hynek and other UFO researchers. You've written many authoritative books, and yet your perspective on the UFO issue seems rather unique in the sense that you don't seem to be jumping on the extraterrestrial visitors bandwagon.
That's what was the main point of disagreement with Steven Spielberg. When I met Steven Spielberg, he was about halfway through filming Close Encounters, and we had a long discussion about what UFOs could be. And of course, for him, the main point of the movie was entertainment, and it was appropriate for the UFOs to be extraterrestrial visitors. I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension, a space or time?
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Mm-hmm. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
In your books, particularly your most recent book, Messengers of Deception, which is many years old, you suggest that UFOs are deliberately trying to manipulate our subconscious mind, to create a mythology in our culture about themselves, which is one of the reasons that they're both physical and concrete, yet very elusive at the same time. Do you still feel that way?
I think to answer that, I'm not trying to evade your question, but to answer that, you have to step back, a little bit farther. What we know today about the UFO phenomenon is considerably more than we knew 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand it at 3 different levels. Okay. And the first level is the physical level. And all we can say about UFOs at the physical level is that it's a lot of energy in a small space. In the space of this, if we could take the energy of a nuclear reactor and contain it within this studio, for example, you'd have something that would approximate what a UFO does. It's a lot of energy in a small space emitted through light energy and through pulsed microwave energy. Mm-hmm. The second level is what happens to witnesses, what would happen to you and me if we were close to that source of energy. And again, now we're beginning to understand the physiological and the psychological correlations of a close encounter.
Yes.
And those have to do with a loss of the sense of space, loss of orientation. I've had witnesses tell me we were driving north when everybody knows they were driving south. Mm-hmm. They were disoriented at the time. Loss of the sense of time, people thinking that only 10 minutes went by and 3 hours went by. Very often effects on the skin, sunburns. I think that was shown in close encounters.
Yes.
Effects on the eyes, going from conjunctivitis to blindness, to temporary blindness in some cases.
And sometimes you've mentioned people have actually been healed of diseases.
There have been cases where after a UFO close encounter, it seems that the healing process had been sped up. Mm-hmm. Now, there are known techniques now using electromagnetic radiation that will heal the fractures, for example, or will heal superficial wounds on the skin, but nothing that would heal as fast as the reported effects. Yeah. So we're beginning to understand at least the descriptions, the symptoms of the exposure to whatever UFO is. And then there is a third level, which is where the level I was addressing in Messengers of Deception, which is a social level.
The impact on our culture.
Yes, and the impact on our belief systems. Mm-hmm. And at that level, and that's something that's very difficult to convey to the believers in UFOs, the believers in little green men from space, that at that level, it really doesn't matter whether UFOs are real or not. If enough people believe that something is real, then it is real in its effects.
In terms of its social reality.
In terms of the social reality, in terms of what people act according to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And that opens a question of, really at two levels, could the UFO phenomenon be manipulating us? Could it be a teaching system of some sort? Perhaps something that we are creating ourselves. Perhaps a series of images that we are projecting. I think Carl Jung came very close to expressing that idea in one of his books. Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not. Who would do a thing like that? Well, I would remind you that during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms, which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood. And I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was, in fact, my conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was, in fact, a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than...
So there are possibly all of these levels going on simultaneously.
Today, with the current technology, that would be possible. One of my interests, as you know, has been to look at ancient sightings, old sightings before World War II, for example, when there is really no confusion with modern technology. And if people describe, say, 1925 or in 1825, a disc flying through the air, then it can only have been very, very few phenomena could have produced it.
And there have been some well-documented sightings going back to the 19th century, for example.
There was, starting in 1896 and going into the spring of 1897, there was a remarkable wave of sightings of airships. Those were described as oval objects flying through the sky with lights on them. And of course, the people in those days could only compare it to dirigibles. only compare them to airships. And those objects were capable of doing all the things that UFOs do today, including taking off very quickly and making 90-degree turns and landing and occupants coming out of them. And if nothing else, I think this is part of our folklore. This is something that we should be studying as part of our folklore.
So, with that interview, you can see the concept that this man has, because I'm going to look at what I was interested in his discussion was the early beginning of his discussion when he was discussing that Strange Encounters of a Third Kind, the movie I'm going to put up for you in a minute, which is that Strange Encounters of a Third Kind. So his vision, I had known about his work, magics of so forth, and I was aware of his work, early in his career, just like anybody else. He is the same age as me. I mean, he's born in 1939. This generation. So I felt very close to his thinking at the time. You understand, basically. But he had. Whether or not there's spacecrafts or these, but now if you take the artistic vision, of our generation, we're raised on the fact that visually speaking, in a movie or something like that, or in writing a pencil, or making a picture of a spacecraft. You understand? You ask any kid in junior high school, can you write? Can you draw a spacecraft? You would find all kinds of different, drawings of young people drawing. What if your art teacher told us, draw me a spacecraft? Draw me what might be on the moon. Things like that. What is that? That triggers the imagination and the creativity of a young person to actually draw, an artistic vision of a spacecraft. Okay, so generally speaking, that would seem in his discussion that all these things didn't exist in certain kinds of culture. Now, if you were going to a French school or European school or something like that, you understand? When I checked out, basically, most Europeans, don't believe in space travel. They created, the French was the first person who created a movie about space travel. You understand? He knows that. That's an artistic vision of people going to space. Fritz Lang in Germany. So going to space, in this particular century, among a lot of people, was a serious doing it from a human point of view, scientifically point of view. But from an artistic point of view, this was a new territory of imagination, you understand, for artists to work in. So, in taking that, why he didn't particularly like the fact that the ending of the movie was the meeting of a strange encounter. And this philosophy is based on the fact that you wouldn't believe that nobody else could come here. In the 1950s, why not? From my point of view, you understand? We're not even in space. We're just at technological level in 1950 of imagination, what space might be, or encounters of people, you understand? So consequently, socially speaking, the context of Strange Encounter of a Third Kind for an American audience, is different from a European audience. We're already geared up. I'm 36 years old when Strange Encounters of a Third Kind was first brought on the scene. for a person of artistic interest, this was a fantastic piece of work. Not to say he was the same generation as me as an artist. He's much younger than I am. But the audience that he was playing that to definitely has had a lot more smarts, my generation anyway, when we saw it. You understand? The way he did. That's why it was interesting what he said. I didn't know that when he acted out the movie. I knew that he had to know this guy because I knew this guy was in the movie. I knew his works. At the same time, I knew about a lot of other things that the Russians were doing about extraterrestrial. There was a lot of fields there. Most scientists cannot accept the fact there's other life out there in the universe. So why is science saying they have to prove that there isn't any life out there? This is my consequence with the religious people, and the conflict between science trying to find out whether God exists. That's not the job of science, man. The job of science is like he said, you understand? But socially speaking, how do we take scientific ideas and imagine what they are? And that's in the artistic field, that the vision is different for the scientific field, you understand? And these two fields are, without culture, the culture of space, the culture of travel, or anything, these are things that artists work with and on the population. So fundamentally, all the things he did in the movie, and we will look at the trailer here to get his point of view. Because in that particular discussion, he said he didn't believe that meeting another species of another kind was worth it. Why is he saying that? I mean, does he think he's the only person in the world? So an artist cannot take a liberality to establish the fact that there are creatures out there. There are other human beings. There are other things. So in 1977, this document was this was a popular family movie. You understand? And that's another thing that people didn't understand about Strange Encounters of the Third Kind. It was for the whole family, the wife, the father, and his kids. It was what we call a family movie. Very few people in the cinema industry can get the whole family to come to the movies, man. You got to look at that point of view that he did. He had something for the younger generation. He had something for the older generation. Little kid going, going out in the garden and meeting somebody. Oh wow, that's interesting. You understand? It wasn't a horror story. So he played all the hysterical cards in the movie, anybody, But Drago's role in the movie was made long before that, Spielberg had done quite a number of research, so okay. I mean, there's a lot of myth about somebody that Egypt is not built by human beings. It's built by some other species. He was aware of the 12th planet, concept that was there about Anunnaki, And this book was made. He must have been aware of that in his research, and he put that in there. You understand? But not in the sense that he put it. What he put it is inductions, specific productions that were coincidental in American military history during the Second World War, such as those planes disappearing. I mean, that's a known fact. I mean, it's still a mystery to this day. Okay, he was still trying to solve it, but the director used that as an encounter, that this had this kind of capacity to take a whole plane, put them up, and put them up in a machine. So the first counter was, we got all these planes, you understand, with all the gas in it and everything in it, but the guys are not there, but the planes are there. So what does that sign say about, what does that say, you know, about what does that say? So for our generation in making a movie, you understand? So when he said, well, I don't particularly like the end, you know. I like the end, you understand, fundamentally, as an artist. You know, what he did, what Hollywood could possibly do with science, you know, science. They built some spacecrafts. They built they built a landing field. They made objects move in space and time. You know, this is not magic. This is science. You understand? You know, these guys. These are science. These are science visions, artistic visions using science. You understand? They had to take these ideas and actually realize them. You understand? So if we and then this is put onto a screen, you know. Now, if you wanna say how much knowledge is in this movie, people can look at this movie from many different kinds of levels, you know, and that's a lot of problems with something like as Strange Encounter of the Third Kind, because it's such a complex organization, you know. I mean, you got to think of how they're going to do that, you know, try to keep all these elements in play, because he's speaking to his audience, which already the audience is set up. I mean, you know, you look back at all the information from 1977 to 1949, you know. Whether or not it's a myth, it's not the story. The problems with the UFO phenomena is not accepting what people say. You understand? This is our major problem in the West, about what people say when they have an experience, whether or not it's true or false. Well, why does a psychiatrist build dualities out of people's encounters? You know. So when I realized that he was a French psychiatrist looking at the psychological phenomena, and William James, which was a guy working on religious experiences in the 18th century at Harvard, you understand? Generally speaking, what is a religious experience? You know, it's really an encounter, in fact. I mean, in the Bible, there's plenty of encounters with this species. You understand? Or this entity or whatever it might be, you know. So who's the artist to make, what is the entity, you know, and who is speaking to Moses? So that's in the Judeo-Christian text, you understand, which he is of Jewish religion, you understand. It's not whether the God exists or anything, which is in the Bible, you understand. So he didn't want to make this a biblical story, you know, like the Ten Commandments or something like that. Or, you know, what they do with Moses or something like Exodus or something like that. He wanted to do something that I thought was brilliant. You know, something unknown. No, encounters. How do we deal with encounters? You know, in a movie sense. Because all these, what we call abductions, are encounters, in fact. You know, the only one that was in the movie that was actually abducted in the movie was a little boy. You know, no one else but the little boy. The other people were abducted long time ago. You understand? They were not new when they came off the ship. You understand? You understand? So things that came down out of that, you know, is that encounter, you know, of this movie. You know, from my point of view, you know, the end of the movie is like the trailer say. I'm going to run the trailer for you and let you look at the trailer.
Close encounters of the first kind. Sighting of an unidentified flying object. Close encounters of the second kind. Physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind. Actual contact. Columbia Pictures, in association with EMI, presents Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The director is Steven Spielberg, whose most recent motion picture, Jaws, is already a legend. The producers are Julia Phillips and Michael Phillips, of The Sting and Taxi Driver. Creating special effects is Douglas Trumbull, who in this film goes far beyond his achievements in 2001: Space Odyssey. For the music, there was only one choice. 11-time Academy Award nominee John Williams, composer of the scores for Jaws and Star Wars. The technical advisor is the world's foremost authority on unidentified flying objects, Dr. J. Allen Hynek of Northwestern University. Heading the cast is Richard Dreyfuss, who has shown his rare talent in such diverse films as American Graffiti, The Apprenticeship of Dudy Kravitz, and Jaws. And making his American debut as an actor is the great French director François Truffaut, winner of the 1974 Academy Award. A close encounter could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. It does happen to Roy Neary. An average working man, Neary finds his life, his very world, changed.
Who are you people? We have very little time, Mr. Neary. We need answers from you. They're honest, direct, and to the point.
Who are you
Avez-vous
people?
pas fait récemment une rencontre?
Have you recently had a close encounter?
I want to speak to someone in charge.
Une rencontre plutôt inhabituelle?
I want to lodge a complaint.
A close encounter with something very unusual.
What the hell is going on around here? Who the hell are you people?
The title of the picture, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, refers to an intriguing possibility.
Well, a close encounter of the first kind is one that is close, but nothing really happened.
Close encounter of the first kind is visible contact with a UFO.
Forget the shape and forget how fast it's going. It's something that you just can't explain. Close encounters of the second kind are those which leave a physical trace. Holes in the ground, fern rings, broken tree branches, telephone lines down, animals disturbed, the stopping of car engines. And the close encounters of the third kind are the most interesting of all. Close encounter of the third kind is really when you meet them.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The experience of an ordinary man, shared by people from all over the world, irresistibly drawn by a compulsion they don't understand, to witness the most dramatic event in the history of the human race. And what you will see has never been seen before. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion.
So you can see from that particular uh, uh, trailer gives you a lot of information in this trailer that if you could look at the interview, back to the interview, to indicate the let's go back a little bit to my friend here discussing this to get a view of my perspective of it. You understand? So in those trailer, as we just saw, you understand, he dealt with what this scientist had been working on, I guess, in this field, because that's why he was chosen. You understand? These encounters, you know, whether or not he didn't agree with the conclusion of the movie, you understand, is another pretext about a cultural vision, you understand, of a people, let's say. And to understand that 1977, you know, the United States had launched what we call a civilian organization called NASCA, the National Aeronautic and Space Agency, you understand? In that particular idea. So American people fundamentally had been geared to go to space as a nation. They decided this was a major work in the population. Now, if all those populations didn't think that Robert F. Kennedy creating the space program, you know, my generation, this was great. This was, you know, I was 18 years old when this group was created. This was for those scientists that they could recruit at this particular point. But the idea that the agency was, you know, now a civilian operation, and if you look at their charter, you know, like what we need to do to sensibilize the American public about we're going to space. You understand? Now, whose job was that? I mean, that, you know, so I'm already 18 years old, you know, so I don't need to be, you know, upgraded from this particular point of view when this agency was created. Of course, I was an artist, and I was not going to, you know, participate this program from a scientific point of view. But my best friend, Clarence Walker, who was a drummer in my band, you know, he was an engineer. He wanted to be a sound engineer, electrical engineer, you know. We both were science-based students, but I didn't want to become a scientist, you understand? I wanted to become an artist, you know. So I use science all the time in my work. And science is part of, you know, artwork, you know. You understand what I mean? For us, you know. So this idea that we were going to space, this gave the artistic end of myself, you know, the job of like convincing the American people that that's what we're going to do as artists, you understand? You know, so we had, from that no generation, the Spielberg generation, this was already done with Sun Ra, for instance, an American artist and theoretician, musician and so forth, already had established some kind of idea about space travel, you know, among artists, you understand? Or what we call at the time science fiction or something like that. But cosmological thinking among creative people in the United States was very vivid. I mean, it was a great open field here, you understand? So for the French guy to have a view, his country, you know, hadn't decided to go to space, you understand? He was, you know, a top scientist in this field, you understand? But it was NASCA that created this agency for space, you know, using German technology that they had acquired, you know, that we didn't have at all, But they had it. And we used this technology to build the space program, with these German scientists. But American scientists, whether or not they were interested in going to space, this is a questionable concept, When you study the American scientific point of view, you understand, whether or not any scientists in the United States during the same period were thinking about going to space. If you take the German scientist, von Braun, he already was intergalactic, space travel. He was a rocket scientist, you understand? So, who is going to be interested in rockets? Military, you understand? And there where I said the scientist has a major problem for making his ideas realizable, you understand, for von Braun. He might have an idea, but how he has to realize his idea as a scientist, he needs support of the government to do that. He can't do that by himself. In the United States, for instance, if we had a von Braun, in the United States, if he had a patent in the United States, he would have gone to the patent office and he would have asked for some money from some investors who say, I got a rocket here that goes to space. Just take the same guy and put him in the United States, but put him in Germany. You understand? They're two different systems of science, United States. Science, from technological to from the intellectual property rights part. You understand? If you got a intellectual property right for how to make a rocket, but then you have to go to the patent office and ask for a patent. You understand? Von Braun didn't make any of his patents available as a scientist. They were working on that secretly. So it was not known to everybody else what von Braun was doing, or they do. We don't know. Okay, so spaceships, that's the next step, a much higher level of technology to imagine a spacecraft, and how it might move in space. You understand? This is all visionary thinking, which artists could manipulate. Scientists, it's different, So artists, you can look at all the history of American artists working with spacecrafts. We went all the way back, okay, in comic books and so forth, Strange Encounters of the Third Kind was like as if that population wasn't aware that there were other people on the planet. That's a questionable concept, you understand, in most of this research, you understand, that I see on the YouTube about, we think that we're the only ones on the planet. And I don't really agree with those Americans of my generation to accept the fact that we're the only one on the planet. When the movie Encounter came, that was like, you got to be out your mind. My generation had already adapted this kind of attitude, But this previous generation, I don't know, these baby boomer motherfuckers, I don't know what kind of education they had. You understand? That's my problem with that group of people. And when Spielberg made that movie as an American director, he was directing it primarily to the American audience. He wasn't directing it to the worldwide audience. You understand? That's another thing you have to look at. So in the end result, the movie takes in these issues that even today, we're still having questions about. And that's what I see with a lot of information being on the internet. But if you take the perspective of 1977 person's point of view, that there is possibilities. No, that's not the word possibilities. You have to stop the possibility business. Possibility allows anything to happen. You understand? There's a possibility that there's life out in the universe. Well, that's not a very scientific statement, basically. Possibilities. Why is science not denying the fact that biological life exists on our whole existence. You know, the whole, you know, the possibility of biological life outside of this biological life. You know, so scientist speaks about his own European scientists from that point. You know, but there are all kinds of science on this planet. There's Buddhist science. You understand? Now, Buddhist point of view of science, you know, is different from a European point of view. Complete. If I'm going to be a scientist in a Buddhist mindset, you understand, I wouldn't have built the atomic bomb, for instance. Why I need to build an atomic bomb? That's, you know, I mean, why would a Christian build it? Why a Christian scientist build an atomic bomb? Any scientist who thinks beyond the moral issue of human beings, that's a little bit out there, you know. You still, as a human being, you're a human being with morals, emotions, and that's what makes you human. If you scientists want to destroy humanity, which I thought your science is different than my science, you know. So that question that our generation had to deal with that. You know, why was the decision taken to make the atomic bomb on our generation, who later, you know, had to deal with it, the moral issue, you know? We're generation, we didn't participate in the war, you know? None of us did. So for us, this was a clean slate that y'all supposed to clean up. And you didn't present that to this generation, you know? Well, man, this is a clean slate here, you know? We got an atomic bomb. Man, so they made us a superpower. And I didn't want America to be a superpower anyway. Who wants a country where you're a superpower? Who wants that? You know, that's not against the United States at all. I don't believe that. It's just scientific. You understand? I'm using the idea of Spielberg's movie, you understand, as the major issue here. Because all these things have to do that, you know? I mean, if you want to power a ship, you need an atomic energy plant to do that, you know? That was a useful concept, to have a ship running on atomic energy, you know? But we didn't have to create the atomic bomb to know that. You understand? That it's not, you understand what I mean? The thing is that this energy exists, you know? Einstein said it exists. But how can you, you know, and it's on this planet, it's in some kind of mineral, you understand? It's called uranium, you know? For that particular generation, you know? For the United States, you know, this was a different story for us, you know. So space travel, when, wow, you know, we knew we had to have something to lift off the planet, you know. But us artists could go beyond these scientific things and into our imagination in creating an imaginary world. No. This is an imaginary dimension, in fact. You know, the cinema business, you know. In cinema, you know, there's the idea of fictitious events, you know, events that could not happen in reality. But these guys attempted to create things in reality. You understand? light bulbs. Yeah, of course, we knew that all this was technologically possible. You know, the first shot with him being that way. You know, you understand? And the ship he was following. It was an oval ship. You know, so the sign of ovality or interdimensional ship or something traveling. So he tried to convey that, in the movie, very, very artistically done. You understand? At that particular period of our artistic or our technological ability. I mean, we couldn't build that ship technologically, but artists can create things, out of images. You understand? So in the terms of that discussion, we'll now move to a real interesting discussion with a really great brother who has a broader view, but he's coming from another generation than mine. Which is if you start out on this road that you're the only one on the planet, then you'll end up whatever those results of that movie, and even the results of a scientist such as what I just said. If you don't, So at that particular point for him, did he believe that there was other as a scientist? So he said to Billsberg, that is possible. He could have said that was possible. There's nothing wrong as a scientist, as a researcher into this phenomenon, you understand, that was happening. Not the word that it was more entertaining. That's not a very good word. What do you mean it was better that way? No, these encounters are real, and he tried to convey them as real, you understand? Such as the family structure, nice little working class family, shows them like playing. Look at that scene, basically, Look at that scene in that movie. What he's saying in that little section of that movie about this little working class family, his wife, told him, blah, 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 and his kids, like all this chaos of his household, He wasn't in an orderly, and he was just, and he was working in an electric company, you understand, as a driver, I don't know, as a repairman, you understand. So he had a scientific base for this, he was scientifically speaking, It's not to say, how could he not believe, you understand, in people outside of space, you understand? Or people living outside. Why should he assume that? I mean, in a particular period, you understand? If you ask somebody in America, do you believe there are other lives outside of yourself, outside of this solar system? And the only question that person can say is what? If you ask mass amounts of people the same question. I didn't say are you alone. I said, do you believe there's life outside of this planet, on this solar system? If you don't know anything in your fucking 1977 to living, you're living in a star system. So we're saying that the whole generation of people in this movie didn't know a fucking thing about science. You understand? And that's a bad assumption, about that particular thing that Spielberg tried to do. You understand? Over here in France, where we were questioning, well, what is Spielberg trying to say? You understand? I said, no, this is an American phenomenon. This has nothing to do with France. To my French colleagues, you don't have this in your artistic culture, you understand? You know, y'all got another culture. You know, so this culture we're speaking about was bred, you know, in the United States by my generation. We were the forerunners to push this kind of culture, you know, as an artistic phenomenon. You understand? John Coltrane's Love Supreme, George Russell, space travel. You know, you got a whole bunch of my generation. I don't talk about my generation. I'm talking about the previous generation of musicians in the United States pushing the envelope of just music by using certain words. You understand? You know, and making certain type of aesthetics. You know, so Hollywood, my man Spielberg, you know, got a chance to take on upon this subject. I didn't read his commentaries after that, you know, but that's my thing on this brother that had just made this interview. So thank you very much. I will be back.